Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm going to be bringing you my May wrap up. May was a bit of a weird reading month for me, and before I get into the video there are a couple of things that I want to talk about. So there are two things that I want to acknowledge really. The first of which, you know that thing that I made all those poems about repealing the 8th Amendment in Ireland, that worked, that happened, and I was ecstatic about it. My excitement for that was kind of dampened by some stuff in my personal life. You may have noticed that I took a bit of a break. You probably didn't notice, but I'm sure the algorithm did. But I didn't make videos for maybe like a week and a half, which for me felt like a really long time because I normally make videos like every 3 days. But yeah, I've moved back in with my mum for a bit, so I'm back in Dublin. For the first time since I was about 18, I have all of my books in the one place. So I think I'm going to do like a little bit of a bookshelf tour at some point. So yeah, things for me are a little bit up in the air at the moment and I'm not as like peppy and chipper as I normally am, but yeah, I'm just going to get into my wrap up. If you're someone that follows my What the Hell Happened to My Haul series, I'm just going to tell you straight up, I only read 2 books from that list. There was loads of books I was meant to read for that, but I picked out like 6, I think it was, as priorities, and I only read 2 of those, but I did read half of 2 other ones. So I read half of Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore and half of White Tears. I'm going to put those on hold for a little bit because I'm trying to focus on reading my physical TBR over the next couple of months. I'll talk about that more in an episode of What the Hell Happened to My Hauls. But anyway, the 2 books that I did read for What the Hell Happened to My Hauls, the first of those was Big Little Lies by Leanne Moriarty. This is probably one of the best books that I've read all year. You know when a book gets so hyped up that you're worried that it will never live up to your expectations? This book totally lived up to my expectations. So this is like, I guess it's kind of like a thriller. I think it's a really great introduction thriller because I'm someone that doesn't really read thrillers that much, and I think it's a really like great gateway book into the genre. But it follows 3 women of like varying ages, but all of their children, like they all have one child that is like kindergarten age, and that's how they end up meeting and forming these friendships. A lot of the book is about the very strange like playground politics that exists among parents, but running simultaneously alongside that we have like stories of their friendships, but also these little snippets of interviews with other parents or teachers that are involved with these women's lives, and you find out that something major has happened at this like school event. You don't know exactly what has happened, you don't know exactly who was involved, but you know someone dies. I think Leanne Moriarty did a fantastic job of like dropping little bits of info into those interview excerpts without giving us too much information. I thought all of the characters were crafted really well. I thought they were all likable but all very much flawed. You know, they were complex and nuanced individuals. And there's a lot to do in this book about how we prejudge people and how we make assumptions about people. I thought it was a really great book and I did not want to put it down. I also read The Ice by Leanne Paul, which I did not like as much. I really loved her first novel, The Bees. But I think The Bees is such a unique novel that you can't really compare anything to it. And I went into this book with the expectations to love it as much as I love The Bees, and they're just completely different novels. So in The Ice we follow this wealthy businessman. He's like the CEO of a company in the Arctic. The body of his best friend is found from 4 years earlier, and this leads him to start looking into the business again and finding out how it was actually run and the secrets behind the business. I think this book was really well written, but it just wasn't really the book for me. Like all of the excerpts from Arctic explorers, I wasn't interested in those. All the like inner dealings of the business, didn't care for them. I didn't really care for any of the characters. I didn't really understand what the business was. But yeah, I don't really know how to review this book because I just kind of feel like I didn't connect to it in any way and I didn't get it. It is written fantastically and it's evident that a lot of research has gone into it. And if you are someone that is really into the setting of a novel being evoked, then I think you would really like this one. But for me, like, setting is something that's quite low down on my list of priorities when it comes to a novel. I'm far more interested in character and plot, and neither of those things in this book interested me. I also read The White Tiger by Aravind Adiga, and I buddy read this with Katie from Books and Things, and oh my god, it feels like ages ago that we did that buddy read. This won the Man Booker in 2008, and I think me and Katie had very similar feelings on this book in that we thought it was really excellently written. We thought that it evoked the setting and the culture and the social experiences of the characters exceptionally well. This looks at a businessman in India, and we realise that he has killed someone. When we first find this out, it's really shocking because you can't really work out what his motives are or why he would want to kill this person, but gradually as the story progresses it becomes clearer and it does make a lot of sense. The entire book is told from his point of view through letters that he is sending, and being in his head really helps the reader to understand why he has done what he's done, what his motivations were. The narrator is fantastic. He's a really appealing narrator to spend time with, even though he's done this awful thing. And he's really funny and witty at points, but you can definitely sense the anger that is beneath this book. The anger at social inequality and poverty in India. I think if I had to choose one word to describe this book, it would be evocative. You can really sense everything that's going on in this book. The setting, the people's emotions. In saying all of that, I found it quite a forgettable read. It didn't really leave me with a huge amount to think about afterwards. I don't think it's a book that is particularly gonna stay with me, but I can't really fault it. I think this is one of those books that is going to be studied in years to come. I think it's one of those books that will make its way onto a lot of literature courses. And I guess that's kind of how I felt by the end of this book. Like, I would have really enjoyed writing an essay on it. Another book that I read this month that I feel like I totally could have written an essay on is Sam Selvon's The Lonely Londoners. This book looks at a number of different characters, and it looks at the immigrant experience in London in the 1950s. We look at a number of different characters who have emigrated from the West Indies and begin to start a new, fresh life in London. We have one character who shows another character around London. The first character has been in London for quite a while, and he's showing this other character like the ropes and how London functions. And it's really fascinating to see 1950s London from those two different perspectives. You know, someone who's emigrated there a while ago and also someone who is newly arriving there. We see how they experience discrimination and racism in the UK. And a lot of the discussions that are going on in this book surrounding that are still incredibly relevant. A lot of immigrants and people of colour in the UK have spoken about how racism in the UK is a lot more subtle than it is in America, and it's far more like institutionalized. This is also a book that I think is very much about loneliness and experiencing the loneliness of being away from home and being in a new place. It's superbly written. All of the characters are charming and fantastic to read about. It's really short as well. I read this on like one plane journey from Birmingham to Dublin, and I couldn't put it down for that whole journey. This month I also listened to a novella by Chloe Caldwell called Women. This is told in the first person perspective from a young woman who is looking back on a love affair that she had had with a woman who was 19 years her senior. In this relationship, this young woman really discovered her sexuality and began to explore it a lot more. But we also see how this relationship was very much damaging for her. But I think what is really interesting about this novella is that you're never quite sure if you're getting the full story. You're never quite sure if your perception of events is entirely filtered through this first person perspective. Essentially, it seems quite like an unreliable narrator a lot of the time. The writing is very clear and it's very emotional, but I do think it's quite a Marmitey book. I do think it's one of those books that you're either going to love or hate. I really like books and films about the flaws and intricacies of romantic relationships, and I really like books that are just small snippets into someone's life. It's a little bit of a self-indulgent book, I definitely give it that. And the narrator can be somewhat irritating at points. I think if you liked Almost Love by Louise O'Neill, then you would enjoy this book as well. And it may be a great read for Pride Month as well. The final novel that I read in May was Another Place by Matthew Crowe. Ooh. So this follows a 16-year-old protagonist named Claudette. She is coming home from hospital after her difficult mental health issues led her to be unable to cope. It's also about another local teenager, Sarah, who had a bad reputation and has since gone missing. And Claudette devotes herself and the goals that she is setting herself in her recovery to find out what exactly happened to Sarah, because they had like this secret friendship, which isn't like that much of a secret friendship really. I feel like the protagonist is definitely exaggerating how close these two characters were. Something that I loved about this book was its depiction of mental health. I thought it was very true to life. I thought it showed the steps for recovery in a really important way, and something that I think is sometimes glossed over in YA novels about mental health struggles and mental illness is how difficult the people suffering can be. It can be really difficult to deal with someone with depression. And I think a lot of the time depression it's depicted as this intense sadness, but I think depression also comes with a lot of anger, and that's something that this book dealt with really well. In saying that, there are a lot of things that I didn't like about it, mainly how it was written. I found the writing extraordinarily clunky at some points, at a lot of points actually, and I also found the plot incredibly obvious, especially with all of the references to Virginia Woolf that are not subtle in any way. And if you pick up on those references, it becomes completely obvious what's gonna be revealed at the end. I don't really give books star ratings, but I feel like if I did, I would probably only give this like a 2 stars. I also have 3 books of non-fiction to talk about, 2 of which are very short, so I will get those out of the way. The first of those is Weird Things Customers Say in Bookshops by BookTube's very own Jen Campbell. This is essentially what it says on the tin. It is weird things that customers say in bookshops. There are snippets of conversations between bookseller and customer, some funny, some just rather bizarre. I think anyone that has worked in retail will be able to relate to a lot of this, but of course, especially if you have worked in a bookish environment. While I was reading this, I was also reading Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore, and I think that was a really great combination. So when I get round to finishing off the second half of Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore, I may pick up the sequel to this book, because I'm pretty sure there's another one. I also picked up Lost in Translation by Ella Francis Sanders, which is a beautiful, amazing picture book about words that cannot be translated into English. There are loads of different languages in there. We've got Norwegian, Hungarian, German, Urdu, some languages that I hadn't even heard of before. If you are someone that is interested in language, then this would be a fantastic book, and I also think it makes a fantastic gift as well. And the final non-fiction book that I read this month was A Good Time to Be a Girl by Helena Morrissey, and I think this is a really important book to read if you are in business, not only if you're a woman in business, but anyone that is in business, and particularly if you have a focus on bringing equality into the workplace or your business. The author talks about her own experiences in building up her career to the point of becoming a CEO, but she also looks at other people's experiences as well, and I think she did quite a good job of acknowledging intersectionality in this book. I don't think she speaks on behalf of anyone that she doesn't represent, but I do think that she has acknowledged that, for instance, compared to a woman of colour in business, she's had an easier time. What I really enjoyed about this book was that it wasn't talking generally about why inequality exists in the workplace. It wasn't talking generally about how to fix it. It was talking about specific things that have been tried, things that have worked, things that haven't worked. I think it's quite a practical book in that way. Also really appreciated was the acknowledgement that sometimes when you're a woman in like that kind of corporate environment, you sometimes feel the need to act more masculine. Definitely acknowledges that that's a thing, but also encourages women that they do not need to sacrifice their femininity in order to be taken seriously. I thought this was a really well written book, and it's something that I would definitely recommend if you are interested in business and large corporations. And finally, I have 2 poetry collections that I'm going to tell you guys about, both by poets that I've read quite a bit from before. The first of those is If I Don't Know by Wendy Cope. I would say that this poetry collection is a lot more reflective and I guess grown up than some of the poetry that I've read from Wendy Cope in the past. The sense of humour in it is a lot more gentle. It's a lot more sombre and contemplative, and there is so much technique in this poetry collection. This is iambic pentameter in this. She is writing villanelles in here. Really quite difficult and intricate stuff, but she does it in a way that is so seamless, and I think that's when you know you have really mastered those forms, is when you don't really notice they're there. I mean, I noticed they were there, but not on first read, I didn't notice they were there. Some of my favourite poems that I marked were Being Boring, A Mystery, and He Tells Her. I'll actually read you He Tells Her because I think it's really good. He tells her that the earth is flat. He knows the facts, and that is that. In altercations fierce and long, she tries her best to prove him wrong, but he has learned to argue well. He calls her arguments unsound, and often asks her not to yell. She cannot win, he stands his ground. The planet goes on being round. The other poetry collection I read was The Other Country by Carol Ann Duffy. I really enjoyed this collection because I really enjoy all of Carol Ann Duffy's poetry. It's possibly my least favourite collection that I've read from her though. It's still really good, but I just feel like it wasn't tied together in terms of theme in the same way a lot of her collections are. In a lot of these poems though, Carol Ann Duffy is pointing out the ridiculousness in a lot of situations, which is something that I definitely appreciate. I didn't put any post-its in this one like I normally do to mark things that I particularly enjoy or appreciate in books, because I read this on a train and I didn't have any sticky tabs with me. But there is one poem in this that just really made me go, oh, that's fully ridiculous, that's a thing that exists. It's this one called Ape. There is a male silverback on the calendar. Behind him the jungle is defocused, except in one corner where trees gargle the sun. After you have numbered the days, you tear off the page. His eyes hold your eyes as you crumple a forest in your fist. People marvel at the beauty of forests in the same moment that they are destroying them. So yeah, there we have it. There are the books that I read in May, plus some ebooks and audiobooks as well. I think in June I'm really going to focus on reading being a form of self-care. I think I'm going to pick up a lot of things that will make me feel good. Anyways, I'm just going to end it there. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. We can have a little chat about them down in the comments. I hope you're having a great day, and I will talk to you in my next video.